So welcome to The Human Element with Karen Judd Smith and Marilyn Morris. Now, today we're going to delve into a topic that often goes unnoticed in our everyday conversations, yet has a profound impact on how we engage with one another and make decisions. It's about our three-brain system. We've been looking at that in some of our earlier ones, but we're going to be seeing now how this fascinating concept that includes the transilience theory helps us better understand how our survival, our social, emotional, and our language-based logical functions interact and can revolutionize. And maybe I don't use that word too lightly, but in some ways, revolutionize our approach to communications and decision-making. But that's not all, because we also need to explore the essential soft skills, or what we're going to call and talk about a little bit here is LAMPP, L-A-M-P-P. And we'll get to that. But that allows us to navigate the complex landscape with empathy, mindfulness, and effective collaboration. So stay tuned as we dive into this important discussion and shed some light on the power of our minds and heart, our minds and our emotions, our minds and the other part of our human element that we're not always paying attention to. That's what we're going to be looking at today. So welcome. I'm glad you could be here with us. So Marilyn, what are you thinking about today as we look at and reflect back on, a little bit of just a reminder of the three-brain system, the fast and slow elements?
Yeah, well, I was kind of struck by thinking about it this week, about how the fast part of our brain, what we call the lizard and limbic, the reactive and the emotive parts of our brain, are just always going, and without our even thinking about them, often, without our thinking about them. And it's only when we bring our thoughts into play that we can maybe begin to understand what's motivating us and pushing us and driving us, and why we reacted in the way that we reacted. But training the brain to think about those things, to kind of slow down those reactive and emotive parts of us, it's like the cognitive, our thinking area is just always running a few steps behind, and it's such a disadvantage. And he's a very famous scientist, recently passed away, but I've been reading some of his works. Edward O. Wilson, who wrote a lot about ants and hive, and he talks about the human species, and he says, unfortunately, while we've got all this evolution, amazing evolution, of the brain, and now we can do science and humanities and all of this, he goes, as a species, Homo sapiens are highly dysfunctional. And I wish I could have had a conversation. Well, I don't know if I could have had a conversation. He was a brilliant man, absolutely. But that was his conclusion in a book called The Meaning of Human Existence, is that the odds aren't good for humankind because we are a highly dysfunctional species. And it would have been fascinating to have a conversation with him about the three-brain system, about how our brains actually function, because I think he would have had some real lively insights about that. But all the literature that's coming out, really belies this fact that 2/3 of our brain is running faster than the part that we rely on to make decisions, and they influence this part, and we make up reasons for those decisions, but they may not be actually really good reasons. We think they might be, but because of all the things going on in our survival brain and in our social emotional brain, by the time it gets here, it might be too late. We make a rash decision that we later rue and regret. This especially happens in the heat of the moment in conversations. It especially happens.
Yeah, listening to talk, it behooves us to think or to recognize, at least the three brain idea gets us to realize that, 2/3 of our functioning is really very fast. And it's amazing that it happens that way. It keeps us alive. It keeps us going. It keeps us on top of things. It gives us, emotional responses to things that have already happened or are definitely happening, and we pick up on things that we don't even know that we're picking up on because these systems are so fast and are in play in our lives. Mm-hmm. So the question comes then, well, how does this fast and slow work together? And is there a chance for them to work together? And maybe E.O. Wilson is saying that, we're really a lost cause because we're just so dysfunctional. But maybe that gives us a chance. Maybe it's pointing the way to the opportunity that lies within that dysfunction. And that is that if we can get our act together, now, who knows? But if we can get our act together so that these three are, I can't help but remember, I can't remember which classical philosopher, I think it was not even just one philosopher, but in the philosophy of some cultures, they envisioned that the way we were is the we, the I, the person we sense of as ourselves is the charioteer, and we've got these two wild horses that are carrying us along. And the charioteer is the one that has to guide and direct. It's like our cognitive brain is the one that's supposedly making the executive function so that these two wild horses don't tip the chariot over, or don't go over a cliff, or don't just go so fast that they do go over a cliff because they didn't realize what was coming down the road. They couldn't see that there was an edge, of the Grand Canyon. And so they were just wildly running. And it's not a bad, metaphor sometimes for how those 2/3, those two horses, and the charioteer, it's just not a bad, I don't know whether it's really perfect, but we do tend to think of our cognitive brain as our executive. And even, in earlier conversations, Marilyn, we talked about that, what is it about it? Like even in an organization, you've got your executives at the top of the organization, but they're not the ones that have literally got the finger on the pulse of what the customers are doing, of what the needs of the marketplace are. They're many times sitting up there, focusing on their strategies and their bottom lines and all of the other really important things for corporate outcomes. But have they got in place the systems that really keep them connected to what is going on the ground? So is that CEO, is that executive actually functioning well alongside those that are the functional rubber hitting the road, so to speak? And that's a question. Some corporations work well. Some adapt even when crises emerge, or they have systems in place so that they are prepared to handle the crises that are bound to emerge in today's tech-driven and global environment, which is constantly being upset by this disruption or that cyber attack, or this change in a country and the financial systems, or whatever, or even just the politics of the day. So having that kind of relationship between those three parties is just fundamental and exceptionally challenging. And so this is the area that I guess that to me is the one that is the very interesting. How do we get these three very disparate components working together optimally? Because it seems like there's so much potential, so much potential in any individual and in any social institution that we're just not tapping.
Yeah, and I think from your background working, decades in the United Nations and seeing, which is, sort of like a negotiation. I want to say like seeing that it's a negotiation factory almost. I mean, that's its raison d'etre, is to bring people together in conversation to negotiate some kind of an outcome that doesn't erupt into some kind of violent reaction, war or juntas or whatever. So they're constantly up against it in having crucial conversations. It's like some of their conversations, lives are hanging in the balance, whether an NGO gets to go in and use medical assistance or bring food or all different kinds of negotiations that have to go on, not just in the kind of charity sense of the word, but in the grind of making sure that people are safe within their environments. So knowing that you had years and years of seeing negotiations work well, negotiations fall apart, and trying to figure out, well, how come over here that went well and over here that was not a good outcome, not just in the corporate world, but in the political world and social world, and then in your own life even.
I was just going to say, I don't have to go to the UN to recognize that negotiations can be challenging, that there can be crucial conversations that I haven't always been good at in ways that I needed to be. And it's taken me time to kind of take the concept of negotiation out of the realm of just walking into a room, speaking with a board, speaking with a diplomat, presenting the facts and making some kind of a rational pitch for something. That's all part of it. But, my own experience in finding that I've been in situations when I didn't see the whole picture. Mm-hmm. That happens that can happen in corporations and in organizations and in political engagement, but it can happen, with our family, one-on-one, because frankly, I mean, we go back and I often think about this. We get to know one another through a few sentences and words that we exchange with one another in a day. Now, maybe we talk for 5 minutes, maybe we talk for an hour, perhaps once a week or something like that. But when we stop and think, but what else is going on in Marilyn's mind for the other 24/7 hours for the rest of the week? How much of Marilyn do I know? Very little. It's like we're all these icebergs and we see the tip of the iceberg of each one and what's going on underneath each one. We barely know the other, barely. Then we stop and think, well, how well do I understand myself? Do I understand why I did that? How could I do that? Why did I respond? I mean, it's like we're also mysteries to ourselves. So all of that is just to say, there's a lot in the world we don't know. And we can't know everything, and there's no need to know everything. I don't need to know every thought that you've ever had, Marilyn, and you don't want to know every thought I've ever had. But it's important that we learn to have ways to glean from another the things that are highly relevant to us and our conversation and the tasks at hand. There's information and possible things to understand are just all but infinite. But normally speaking, we do have goals and objectives, even if it's just getting some attention for a moment or filling up time to talk or whatever it is. We've got goals. So how do we do that? And how do we utilize our words, our language, our freaking language? It comes down to those simple words. That's kind of all we've got to kind of this tiny little threads of connection between us in the world are our language. So and we've got that language is not just, actually, it's not just the words, but it's what we see with our eyes, the context of the environment. There's all of those different pieces to that communication. But our life really does hang on a thread most of the time. And what we experience and what we do and how we experience the other. And so,
and yet, Karen, isn't it
so little? We know so little about one another. So having that curiosity to understand is such a fundament to me. It's become such a fundamental piece of myself to cultivate.
Yeah, well, my experience of you over the years has been that you're insatiably curious, but that's because you have a science background, and it is, well, how does that work, and what's going on with that, and constantly asking questions, especially how does that work, how to make that work, and just to kind of introduce folks to LAMPP, because it's something that it's been a journey for you and it's evolved over time, but give us and we won't go through each one, but give us the acronym for LAMPP, because it's such a wonderful thing to think about, lighting your lamp. And so tell us a little bit about that, what each one stands for, and a little bit about your journey to get to this very handy living kind of living hack.
It is very handy because it's just a tool to help remind things to do in the moment, or in, as you said before, in the heat of the moment. Sometimes when we need a little prompt, maybe all of our alarm systems go off in a critical moment, because that's usually where we realize, oh, I don't know enough, or it's usually in the midst of crisis that we notice what we don't know. And then having some way to help us through that difficult moment, and yet still not just end up pulling back and protecting ourselves, but how to utilize those moments in a proactive and useful and still ideally creative way to move forward is really important to me. And I don't know whether just going over the acronyms is, and absolutely I can do that, but a lot of what to me is I've realized is that for whatever reason, I have also a profound belief in the all but miraculous nature of each human being, the creativity given the opportunity, the resources of the individual, the things that we can do just as even just our bodies do, even if we don't have a university education or anything like that, that we can navigate, negotiate, we can climb mountains, we can ride bicycles, we can learn how to have a sense of humor somehow. That was always amazing to me, how babies learned to have a sense of humor. You don't teach a sense, but anyway, there's so many amazing things about the human being. And how to tap that, how to allow each person to live their fullest potential. That's just always been, that's another thing that drives me in that sense. And I guess I have at some level, as much as I look at some people and think, oh, they're idiot or a jerk, excuse me. But I do the bad me, but still, by and large, I look at most people and think that just they're absolutely amazing, and what each person is able to do in their world with what they have, with the resources they have. It's stunning. and how to optimize that, how to bring out the best of each person, how to give each person that opportunity for their potential to be realized and not just stuffed away. So that's a motivator. That's a motivator. And why I say it is because I think it's important, not just for me, but to me, it's an important part of the mindset as we go into any discussion or potential negotiation or dialogue on critical issues or even non-critical issues, that we know, or that we at least are open to the possibility that because of the capacity of that person that we're engaging in, and because of our own capacity for creativity, if we can reach a point where we can collaborate together, we can make new stuff happen that hasn't happened before. And that's what we need. I mean, go and look at the news today. We need to not just redo the problem that has made the problem. We need to be able to have different conversations. We need to be able to say, yes, there are massive problems in the world. So what is it that we can do? It may not turn the world upside down in one day, but every little piece done differently. So seeing that two individuals or more in corporate environments or social institutions or government or whatever, when we're in our most optimal state, when we are in that place where we can engage creatively on a topic, it's just plain amazing what can be done. But getting to that point is what is the challenge.
Correct.
Knowing that it's there and keeping that front of mind as a goal and an objective starts to set up the reason why we have LAMPP. So there are those, parts that kind of assumptions, fundamental assumptions and mindset elements that need to be understood in a way for lighting the lamp to work. Because when you see that what is possible, and that's the goal and the objective, that can also then give the reason for utilizing LAMPP. And I will get to it, and I'm not afraid of answering you about that. But to me, it was just important to say that there are some preliminaries to understand for those simple little actions to make sense, and for us to be prepared to put the attention and to keep ourselves at it, trying it, testing it out, seeing if it works, seeing what, oh, that tone of voice did work, that tone of voice didn't work, whatever it might be, to then come back and try it again. It's so we have that mindset and end outcomes and objectives that we want to achieve have to give us enough reason to make an effort to practice and gain the skills, which LAMPP is really just a kind of a way to put together core soft power, what I call soft power skills.
Yeah. For me, learning LAMPP and practicing it in conversations, and I've spent nearly a quarter of a century in my career having critical and crucial conversations, working in hospice with folks, and so there's a very critical and crucial time in people's lives. So those conversations are there for kind of front and center. And what I reflected on in learning LAMPP, it's not just a handy acronym, but it is actually in other courses that you've taught, your way of distilling down what's the key thing that's going to work. And
Right.
for me, when I studied it and reflected on it, each component of the LAMP method helps us to have respectful, caring, insightful conversations. And that's what impressed me about it. It's not just oh, isn't this cute, a little acronym, but each point brings you to having a better conversation of the mind and the heart. It includes both. And unlike corporate or group kind of negotiations, or even NGOs and the United Nations with all that kind of high-minded philosophy, and it is appropriate there, but this is a kind of a tool, a method, if you will. It's a toolkit that helps you have those very important conversations in a mindful way and in a heartfelt way. And that's unusual, that combination. So go ahead and distill a little bit of that for us, or at least give us the acronym, and we can explore it in other sessions that we'll have.
Yeah, because we're clearly running out of time here for our 30-minute slot. But yeah, and each one of these, diving into this, it at the simplest level, it's a tool that when you just do it, it's amazing what can happen. And then it can begin a journey to dig into there's a lot of research behind a lot of these elements. There's a profound, there's theories, but there's the theory and the practice. And often I like to make the difference between kind of information and the kind of knowledge that the purely cognitive knowledge that we have, or that we can get, easily get from the web, from the Google gods, or now the AI gods, the Chat GPT gods, or the Bard gods, or the whatever else. But that's not the tacit in the body experience of something that is a whole nother level. And that's something that, you've heard me. The body is the base. You've heard that from me. I don't know how many times, but anyway, so the concept of lighting the lamp is that it does. It's an approach to not just conversations, but to relationship building that is not just important for our personal lives, but when you bring also these skills into the professional environment, it still works there. Profoundly. People know that trust and real genuine engagement and feeling heard is not just important for our family members or for you and I, but it's also profoundly important for people in negotiations, in the high stakes negotiations that take place in the Security Council, for heaven's sakes, or wherever else. Anyway, at every different level. So LAMP, let's just, going over them pretty quickly. Listen and label emotions. So you'll at different times hear me talking about we've heard about the three brains and the emotional component. And just, the aside again is that our capacity as emotional beings is critical and important for us all. So one of the things that helps us as emotional beings, to cultivate our emotional life fitness, is to gain, improved language for even our emotions. In our affect-phobic society, as a friend of mine, Natasha, will remind me that one of her mentors, I think, and some people might know their name, Ken Isaacs, bemoans the reality of our society as being affect phobic. We just stay away from emotions. And in fact, most negotiation courses will tell you just don't deal with emotions. Just don't bring your emotions into the room with you. Well, fat chance of that happening. If you've got a brain, you brought them in.
They're there.
Yeah. They're there. What you do with them, that's the critical piece. You're not going to not have emotions. Otherwise, you'll never make a decision. That's been proven, and we can't go into that. But anyway, so listen and label, be able to label emotions. What that means is identifying the other, identifying ourselves, those emotions. Okay, so without getting into too much, I'm probably already diving into this too much. But anyway, and then accept and assure. So in the conversation with the other, you don't always have to agree. And even people who do hostage negotiating, well, very, very, very clearly say you have to be able to accept the other person, accept what they're saying. You don't have to like it. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to, agree with it. But you've got to show that you accept the other person. Otherwise, you can't have that you can't develop the rapport and the trust that is essential for hostage negotiation to come to the kind of conclusion that if you feel that I can't accept you today when you're tired, tomorrow when you're at your best, the day when you're feeling loving and caring, as well as the day when you're feeling bitter and saddened, if you can't feel that I accept, how does that affect the relationship? But accepting and then finding ways to assure the other that you do accept them. I might not agree with you, but I accept that you have that idea, and I'm thinking about it, I'm considering it, I'm hearing it. That makes a profound difference to where that relationship can go. As you can see, some of these things that, you don't just pick them up and you find them one day and then decide to add them into the mix. These are big things. Anyway, so then the next one, the M for mirroring mindfully. I guess today with all the mirror neuron stuff, that's very nice or whatever, but that's just a little skill and we're not going to go into it, but the point is to do that mindfully. Mirroring is a very, very simple tool to mirror another person's words, to show that you're hearing them, listening to them, and can reflect back their words. And then, even behind that, we've got 5 levels of listening, and how do you show somebody that you're actually listening to them? You're not just sitting here plotting my next thought and what I'm going to say next, no matter what it is. I'm just nodding so that you'll feel like I'm listening, but I'm not. I'm preparing my next comment. In other words, I haven't heard you at all. But doing that mindfully and in a way, and doing the exercise that I'm talking about in a mindful way. So we're not going into the do's and whatever. So then the next one is to be able to pause and to paraphrase, to have heard the other enough that I can, in my words, reflect back to the person what I heard them say. And sometimes that can be as simple as, oh, that's what you heard? That wasn't what I meant. And then they'll correct you. And that's good information. But anyway, so there's, and also to use and to know the value of silence, which a lot of this, I'm not telling you, Marilyn, this is who you
bread
are.
And butter.
As a chap, it's your bread and butter, whatever. Yeah. And so then next we get to more to the paralinguistics, the body language and the tone of voice and all of those multidimensional things that are not as obvious, but they're critical importance when you are engaging with the other person. If I ask you a question and I have a tone of voice that is disbelief and angry, or I ask with a genuine, almost turn of the head and expression of genuine curiosity, very different impact on the other person. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we've well gone over time, but that was a kind of a shortened version of the LAMPP, just to give you an indication that when we dig into those things, begin to understand this little set, and there of course there's more negotiation skills. There are more kind of next step things that can be learned. But even when we do one or two of these in critical moments, we can be utterly surprised at the outcome of that conversation, and perhaps even more importantly, the outcomes of that in our relationships. Mm-hmm. And that's really important when those relationships, for example, with our loved ones, our spouses, our children, our families, our small communities that we work with all the time, that can be so important for us and for our experience and our sense of ourselves, and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so that's a very quick look at LAMPP. And all I can say is that when we do even one or two of those little things, and we watch and we observe and we notice, it can be amazing how powerful those things are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've experienced it, and other folks that we've taught to have experienced it, as you say, comprehensively. Though you say you only practice one or two, but to have all of these and to pre-train and to be ready for when the heat of the moment comes, I think comprehensively what the LAMPP method strikes me as is that I'm conversing now with that whole person. It's very unusual that you see the paralinguistics, for example, added into a negotiation, but I'm noticing their body language.
Right.
I'm noticing not just what they say, but I'm also in the labeling of their emotions. Even if I don't tell them, I'm thinking of it. So I'm addressing them, their body, mind, heart, even their soul. I'm addressing, and a lot of that then comes back to me. They begin to mirror that. And so the relationship shifts and changes. It's really a remarkable method, Karen, to be honest.
Because also part of it is each one of us is, we all have our three brains. Even if they don't consciously notice and make use of the body language of the other, they get it.
Mm-hmm.
When we feel, this comes back down to, one of our projects, the Angry Moms Project. We know that as many times as moms in the family, the dynamics are such that we become the mom and not the person.
Mm-hmm.
And still, we're people. We too want to be heard. Listen, not just because we're demanding, did you hear me? But, as a person, we want to be heard. We want our voice. But anyway, it's a complicated situation. But we want to be we want to be heard, and we know when we're heard. Every person, because we have these three breaks. We have this fast part of us and our slow part of it. And even if we haven't got it all together and we haven't got it all in perfect, it's not a symphony for it. Still, we react and respond. And the person in front of us is going to know when we hear them, when we accept them. Mm-hmm. And even if in that moment, they can't think of anything different to say other than every time when they've faced off with you, they had a line that they finished with, they'll probably finish with that one again, but they'll go away and think. They can't help but be changed. We're systems. We're not just a thought. We're not just a word. We're not just a moment. Each one of us is a three-brain system, putting it kind of simply, but, trying just to emphasize the nature of the dimensions of us.
Yeah.
So,
Karen, in summation, I think often in the psychologists say that the human beings have 4 fundamental desires: to be seen, to be heard, to be felt, to be understood. And I've yet to find, and I've read through a lot of this kind of literature over the years as a professional, always trying to hone my conversation skills. The LAMPP method gets to all 4 of those. And that's the impressive part to me. And if there's any hope for angry moms, I think a soaking in of the LAMPP method and the application of it is just, it's been my experience that it is, it's a fundamental game changer. It changes our relationships, little pieces and bits at a time.
Yeah, because of it, and I'll just wrap this up for this week, because I think a lot of even though we haven't used the word so much in this conversation, because we're looking at LAMPP, and that is a way of explaining specific skill sets, and therefore from that acronym then we dive into the how-tos of doing each one of those, so that it's very practical, very simple, but very effective. So that's the purpose of that. But what all of that is doing is creating an environment where empathy is nurtured and has an opportunity to be experienced and part of that relationship. And so empathy is the closest word that we have to kind of an experience of things that is meaningful and profound. I mean, if you go back, and this is where you go back into, psychologists like was it Rogers and people who would, really do the kind of the group counseling and all of those kinds of things. But building empathy and having that empathetic experience naturally allows transformation. So part of what goes on because of the LAMPP is not something I can do to you, not something that I can do for you, but it's setting up the environment and the circumstances that are essential for you to have that experience which is transformative, that allows you or me or both of us to actually, from the core of our beings, to have a transformative experience. So it's actually, it's a healing process in many respects, but it's not just from the healing side, but from the moving forward side, it's an empowering experience. And so that's also what's baked into this. Enough.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, great to have this conversation, and hopefully others who are listening in can glean some good things. That's the whole point.
And even if they don't, then hopefully we've made some things more clear to ourselves as well as for others. Thank you very much, Marilyn. And so with that, we'll look forward to seeing you same time, same place next week at our human element, and we'll see you there as we delve more into a lot of this stuff.